Nightline is proudly brought to you by Ansett Australia, one of the world's great airlines, and The National, tailoring banking to your needs.
Welfare payments targeted in the search for budget savings. ASIO accused over a woman's marriage to a Syrian defector, and health worries for Kieran Perkins as his Atlanta deadline nears.
From National 9 News, this is Nightline with Jim Waley.
Good evening. It now seems to be a question of not whether the new government will break promises, but how many. Public sector job cuts have already burst through the election promise barrier. Welfare payments look like being next. The Social Security Minister today refused to rule out changes to welfare benefits, but insists the needy would be protected. Laurie Wilson has our report.
The government's message during the election may have been no cuts in welfare, but now it seems the need to slash spending could mean at least some welfare benefits will be reduced.
Well, it could. I just don't want to set hairs running now that I'm in no position to discuss because, as I said, decisions haven't been taken.
That's outraged the welfare lobby.
The Prime Minister wrote to ACOS telling us that Social Security would not be cut.
But there does seem to have been a subtle shift in Mr Howard's commitment.
One group in the community that is not going to be heard of the most vulnerable. Now, we're not going to play around with the levels of sole parent benefits and their entitlements and things like that.
John Howard promised to retain the existing child care rebate, but Jocelyn Newman has refused to rule out the possibility it could become subject to a means test.
Well, anything is on the table at the moment. I can't rule things in or out at this stage.
Welfare groups have warned there'll be strong opposition to any attempt by the government to back away from its election promises. Concern too at a meeting in Brisbane to discuss the government's review of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission.
My office has been inundated with complaints about mismanagement and the misuse of money, fraud, favouritism and nepotism. And that is coming from Indigenous people themselves.
But Democrats leader Cheryl Curnow criticised the way the government has handled the issue.
There's a perception being perpetrated that all blackfellas are either crooks or bludgers or can't handle money. Let's not forget Alan Bond and Christopher Skase.
Laurie Wilson reporting for Nightline.
The government is investigating claims by a Brisbane woman that ASIO was involved in her marriage to a man who later turned out to be a Syrian defector. The woman says the intelligence agency put her life in danger without her knowledge, and she fears for her safety. Laurie Oakes reports.
This was the wedding in November 1994. The groom, claiming to be a businessman from Lebanon, was married under the name Kais Monza. But according to the bride, Monica, who took her story to 60 Minutes, he told her months later he was actually a Syrian defector, living in Australia under a false identity and protected by the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, ASIO.
Well, I was just so mortified. And I thought, well, who is this man that I've married?
She says he told her he was a MiG fighter pilot in the Syrian Air Force who escaped to Israel, handed over military secrets and was then sent to Australia with a forged Lebanese passport. In her letter to Foreign Minister Alexander Downer last month, Monica claimed an ASIO agent, posing simply as a friend of her husband's, helped to persuade her to marry him without revealing his real background or that her life could be in danger.
I fear for my life and I don't know which direction it's coming from.
I did the right thing and made sure that her letter was passed to the Attorney General.
60 Minutes reporter Richard Carlton was summoned to ASIO's Canberra headquarters on Tuesday by Director General David Sadlier and asked to suppress the defector's nationality.
He will possibly, in Mr Sadlier's words, be hunted down and murdered here in Australia, and back in Syria there will be reprisals against his family.
But Carlton said the man had already blown his own cover.
Over a 3-day period, he had $1,000 worth of telephone calls to his family in Syria. Now, there's no question in the world those phone calls will be tapped.
The key question, though, is did ASIO, on behalf of the Israelis, help to hoodwink an Australian woman into a sham marriage, one that could have put her in danger? Attorney General Darryl Williams has ordered the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, Ronald McLeod, to conduct an immediate investigation. Prime Minister John Howard is believed to have been fully briefed. Coincidentally today, before his lunchtime walk around Parliament House, he spent an hour with former Prime Minister Bob Hawke discussing, among other things, the Middle East. Laurie Oakes for Nightline.
The first Australian paedophile charged over sexual offences committed overseas has been jailed for a minimum of 6 years. He pleaded guilty to 7 charges, including the molestation of a 3-year-old Sydney girl and a 5-year-old in the Philippines.
The 44-year-old man is identified only as ARC because he was bashed in jail. Last year, he was charged for indecently assaulting a 3-year-old girl in a Sydney shopping mall. After the arrest, police searched his home and found videos of naked children, including one showing a 5-year-old girl ARC says he bought for $40 in the Philippines. ARC was sentenced to 4 years jail for the Sydney offences and a further 2 for the crimes in the Philippines.
2 years seems inadequate, considering the maximum term is 17 years under the child sex tourism law.
At the Wood Royal Commission today, a British expert on the sexual abuse of children gave an insight into the minds of pedophiles. Raymond Wire, who was on video link thousands of kilometres away in Birmingham, used a chilling story of a young patient to refute claims of pedophile groups that children aren't harmed by sex.
She put her hands sort of down below, saying, "It felt nice here." She pointed to her tummy and said, "You know, I felt sick here." She pointed to her heart and said she felt guilty here. And she pointed to her head and said, "I don't understand it here."
Also today, the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference has released a 9-point plan to deal with sexual abuse by priests and brothers. This follows evidence to the Wood Royal Commission showing that senior churchmen failed to act against suspected pedophiles in the priesthood. Among the initiatives included in a pastoral letter to Catholics are a program to treat priests suffering from psychosexual disorders. Fiona Pye for Nightline.
One of the greatest crime mysteries of Australia has been the disappearance of the 3 Beaumont children in Adelaide. Now, 30 years later, claims by a Dutch psychic who said he knew where the children were buried are being re-investigated. Adelaide businessman Con Polites is financing the excavation of an Adelaide factory. Mr Polites believes the original dig was in the wrong place. Kieran Perkins' coach has revealed there are concerns about the champion swimmer's health as he fights for a berth in the Australian team for the Atlanta Games. Perkins' chances improved today when he qualified second fastest for tomorrow night's 1500 final in the Olympic trials.
Everyone wants our best-known swimmer to surface from his slump. This morning's 1500-metre heat was the perfect way for Perkins to loosen up and work on his troublesome stroke. Coach John Carew didn't miss a beat and at last found a positive.
Much better performance. He's starting to get back into his stroke.
Perkins' time of 15 minutes, 26.46 seconds is second fastest for tomorrow night's final. Daniel Kowalski heads the field, Glenn Houseman is third quickest, the top 2 place getters go to Atlanta. But right now, Perkins is the headline act, and the headlines continue to scream, what's wrong with the world record holder? Carew now believes it could be very low iron levels, and Perkins will have a full medical examination after the trials.
If he wasn't an athlete and so fit, I have been told by a medical person it could mean that he's very sick with something.
And if Perkins qualifies for the Olympics, his camp says they won't be part of any deal to replace Malcolm Allen with Perkins in the 400 freestyle.
I'm pretty sure that Kieran wouldn't accept any deal, and I'm sure that I wouldn't like him to.
Live coverage of the 1500 metres final on the 9 network tomorrow night. Peter Overton for Nightline.
After the break, Chernobyl. 10 years later, could it happen again? And the death of AFL champion Trevor Barker.
I'm at the 6:25 to Brisbane.
It's boarding now, but I think we can take you on, Mr. Barry.
Will I miss it?
No one can miss that, sir. We'll do our best. Gate 3.
Thank you.
Have a great flight.
Excuse me, please.
At Ansett Australia, we believe how you get to where you're going is just as important as where you're going.
That's yours?
Revolting. This is the future of corporate computing.
No.
Wait a minute.
This is.
Whoops.
Sorry.
Scratch that.
The future is definitely this, we think.
Everybody has visions of the future. Nobody knows which ones will be right, but we're working to make sure you can't go wrong by engineering network systems that are prepared for every outcome. So no matter which way the future goes, you'll have chosen correctly. Digital, whatever it takes.
From Universal Pictures and Imagine Entertainment, Steve Martin, Dan Aykroyd.
You must think I'm a nincompoop.
Yes. And Phil Hartman.
I'm telling you, he's a boob!
Sergeant Bilko.
Where can you call in for the largest range of quality carpets, vinyls, rugs, and wood flooring? Who can you call on for the most competitive prices and expert advice? Where would you call to get your floor expertly laid? And who can you call for free home consultancy, day or night? Call on Carpet Call Floor Centres, the experts in the trade.
The special stunned Australia.
It's a cylindrical object, I'd say 30 feet in length.
Now the movie, history's most celebrated UFO landing.
I saw the bodies.
He knows you're here.
And the shocking cover-up that stopped the world.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The hell you don't.
Would you look what you're doing to us?
From discovering the truth.
I know what I saw. You have nothing.
For the first time, Martin Sheen and Kyle MacLachlan.
More of them coming.
Mitsubishi presents Roswell, Sunday, 8:30 on Channel 9.
Former AFL star Trevor Barker died today after a battle with cancer. He was just 39. St Kilda will honour Barker by naming the club's Best and Fairest award after him. Tony Jones has our story.
Model for thousands of youngsters, Hollywood looks and a ton of football talent. That talent, quite literally, put him head and shoulders above teammates and opponents alike. Recruited from Cheltenham, Barker played his first senior match in 1975. He went on to play 231. He won the club's Best and Fairest twice and represented his state on 7 occasions. Yet he never experienced the adrenaline rush of a finals match. He went part of the way to remedying that by taking VFA club Sandringham to premierships in 92 and again in 94.
Just walking onto that ground after the game was one of the best feelings anyone could ever experience.
Following those successes, Barker was lured back to Moorabbin in an assistant coaching role.
I like to think of the way he was, not a couple of days ago. You know, a lot of people seem to think of the present, but I think the wonderful thing about being a great mate with the guys is the memories you have with them.
It had become evident in recent months that Barker was gravely ill. He'd had a growth removed from his stomach last year, and although the cancer was spreading, was able to continue with his work at the club.
He helped me personally quite a lot, especially through hard times, and you got to miss someone like that.
With the flag flying at half-mast, there was an outpouring of grief at the home of the Saints today, supporters trying to come to terms with their loss. That loss came soon before 8 o'clock this morning, shortly after Barker's family left his bedside. To the end, he displayed the courage which made him one of the game's greats.
Iran's foreign minister visiting Lebanon has advised US Secretary of State Warren Christopher to quit his Middle East peace shuttle and go home, which is exactly what Mr. Christopher is likely to do this weekend. His efforts to broker a peace deal between Israel and Hezbollah apparently stalled. The true strength of the IRA bomb found yesterday under London's Hammersmith Bridge has now been revealed. The explosion, which occurred, was actually only a small charge meant to detonate the much larger main bomb, 2 briefcases crammed with the plastic explosive Semtex. Security officials say the bomb was potentially the most powerful ever planted by the IRA. We've done some terrible things to our home planet, but the greatest desecration must be contamination with nuclear radiation. 10 years ago this week, the nuclear disaster at Chernobyl frightened the world. But have we learnt our lesson? It seems not.
They are engineers, construction workers, secretaries on their morning commute. A commute through some of the most devastated land in the world. Fields that grow nothing, forests that are stunted, villages long since abandoned. These people are among the 6,000 workers who travel every day to jobs at Chernobyl. The explosion that ripped apart Reactor 4 that April day unleashed 200 times as much radiation as the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs combined. For days, the fires raged, and for days, the Soviet leaders did not tell the world or their own people. When finally villages around the plant were evacuated, the radiation had already spread. Today, visitors are advised to wear protective clothing at several places, including this dump site for equipment that was used in the cleanup.
It's climbing. It's dirty.
Radiation levels here are still many times higher than what's considered safe. 10 years later, this is still some of the most contaminated ground on Earth. People who work here are limited as to how long they can stay, and for an 18-mile radius around, no one is supposed to live. But they do. We found some of them in the village of Ilintsy. Maria and Fyodor Muzachenko were forced from their home 9 days after the accident. Authorities then moved them 3 times more. In the end, they said it was easier just to come home. The city of Pripyat, where most of the Chernobyl workers used to live, is today a ghost town. In the months after the accident, the workers and their families were moved to a new city, built especially for them on the edge of the zone. But this place is known to be contaminated too. Valentina Salakova had to make a wrenching choice. She worries about the health of her children, but says as much as she'd like to, she can't leave. In a country with widespread unemployment, Chernobyl means work. 8 times Ukraine has promised to shut down Chernobyl. 8 times it has changed its mind because the cost in lost energy and jobs would be too high. Those who run the plant insist that despite what the rest of the world thinks, it is safe. But that's exactly what they said 10 years ago.
Former international cricket star Imran Khan has made his debut in Pakistani politics by launching a movement for social justice. He says he'll battle corruption and injustice in Pakistan. The move comes 12 days after a bomb destroyed part of his charity cancer hospital in his hometown, Lahore. The Kennedy garage sale in New York continues to rack up huge bids. Jackie O's string of fake pearls worth only a couple of $100 went for almost $250,000. JFK's golf clubs, complete with monogrammed bag, sold for almost $1 million. A Perth couple has suddenly found itself in the midst of a large family with the arrival of quads. The 3 girls and a boy arrived 8 weeks early and were delivered by caesarean. For Shari and Steve Nelson, it was a big relief when all the quads were safe and sound. The Nelsons already have a son. Now they have to name the new kids on the block. In a moment, Paul Lynham's wrap-up of the week in politics.
Exclusive on 60 Minutes. An Australian security scandal.
My husband said he would kill me for revealing him.
Our spies caught red-handed. An international plot to hide a traitor here.
I'm not allowed to know your name.
And the Brisbane housewife.
And I thought, well, who is this man that I've married?
An innocent pawn in a web of deception.
What can you say? This man has taken part in destroying my life.
Is that you? Toyota presents 60 Minutes, 7:30 Sunday.
please consider the new Mitsubishi Magna.
From Universal Pictures and Imagine Entertainment, Steve Martin, Dan Aykroyd.
You must think I'm a nincompoop.
Yes. And Phil Hartman.
I'm telling you, he's a boob!
Sergeant Bilko.
Deciding which way to go with your business communications can put you in a real spin. Get everything you need to know at ATUG 96, the telecommunication and data networking exhibition that'll point you in the right direction.
Good evening. This final week before the opening of the new Parliament has seen the political soap opera quicken its pace. The new ministers are speaking out more readily. We've had some good economic news. Prime Minister Howard's waved the flag, and former Prime Minister Keating walked away from politics, sending a clear message to his constituents who'd faithfully supported him at the March 2 election. He always did have a way with words. The week began with a virtual parade of ministers pronouncing on all sorts of issues. Immigration Minister Philip Ruddock suggested that one way to clear the refugee detention centres would be to limit the refugees' access to our legal system.
It adds very significantly to the costs that we have to meet as a community, and these are the people who are confronting our compassion.
Well, if we eliminate the compassion, presumably there won't be anything left to confront. A neat solution, and cheaper too. There's nothing cheap, though, about the idea of forcing Optus to stop aerial cabling and go underground in the race to hook us up to pay TV.
I've had estimates given to me of $4 or $5 billion for metropolitan Adelaide alone.
And that doesn't even count the free set of steak knives for each new subscriber. Also expensive, the Navy's $46 million purchase of 2 second-hand helicopter landing ships from the Americans.
It looks to me as though there is at least $23 million worth of extra expenditure in fixing up the rust, as you say, or the deterioration around the waterline and other places.
Somehow, deterioration around the waterline sounds a lot better than rust, don't you think? Especially when you're talking about a multi-million-dollar warship. But however you describe it, the Minister insists the Navy will have to pay for it. On a brighter note, the PM and Aboriginal leader Mick Dodson had a friendly chat this week. Mr Dodson said Mr Howard had been very receptive and attentive.
It's pointless talking at odds with each other if we are essentially all on about the same thing.
Precisely. Another thing many people were on about through the week was pedophilia, which seemed to be lurking everywhere. In Bangkok, Foreign Minister Downer announced an independent inquiry into the behaviour of our diplomats.
We need our diplomatic service to be squeaky clean.
And in Sydney, Family Services Minister Judy Moylan, meeting with her state counterparts, discussed a national strategy against pedophiles.
Particularly where it involves pursuing abusers across boundaries, across state borders.
On the economic front, it was Good News Week, with inflation falling sharply to 3.7%.
Today's inflation result is a very good thing for Australia. It certainly re-endorses the case for continued wage restraint.
Hey presto, the next day there was good news on that front too, showing wages and salaries rising by only 4.2% over the year. Not a bad legacy from a Labor government that was supposed to be economically incompetent.
Mr Howard's challenge is to get a wages policy that matches one which delivers to the Australian economy, delivers the possibility of low interest rates, and delivers a decent and socially just wage outcome to all Australian workers.
So there. Talking of workers, there'll be many more on the dole by July 1, with 1,300 permanent public servants and 600 temps to be cut from the Department of Employment alone. And insiders say that's just the start. On the other side of the ledger, the tax office is facing a $3.5 billion bonanza on Monday, the deadline for companies to file returns for fringe benefits tax. Tax expert Ray Regan says many will get it wrong because the rules covering perks are too confusing. To start with, the taxman's identified 46 different types of entertainment.
We've got legislation that was only passed on the 12th of December 1995, but is backdated to the 1st of April 1995, and golly gosh, virtually no one annotates. In other words, they don't break up their American Express or Visa cards when they go out to meals, and really nobody knows what to do.
Clearly, expert advice is called for. What would a former Treasurer suggest? He's got to stop doing that. Jim.
Paul. Still to come on Nightline, the finance and weather at Eddie Maguire's sport. And Eddie, a great performance by Queensland in the Super 12 rugby tonight.
It certainly was, Jim. Yes, the Reds have handed out a thrashing to the star-studded Auckland side. Also tonight's AFL action, Olympic swimming trials, and in league, Canberra takes on the Bulldogs.
Monday on A Current Affair, why doctors don't want you to see your medical records.
PIA, meaning pain in the ass.
The nasty labels and secret codes hidden in your files.
SOB, silly old sitting on bed short of breath.
That could jeopardise your health.
Did not enjoy seeing my son suffer.
Plus, moving down under. Americans escaping the concrete jungle.
But no walls. No walls.
And Londoners lured by those Aussie soaps.
Do you recognise all these places here?
Is that Cheryl's? Yeah.
On A Current Affair.
I'm going to use a new vacuum cleaner, Mum, okay?
With more features, more power, and more to make life easier, everyone wants a turn of the new Electrolux Excellio, the ultimate vacuum cleaner.
Might even get rid of the smell.
Sydney, one of the 7 wonders of New South Wales. Sail through lunch on the world's greatest harbour. Go shopping in the Rocks, where the first settlers did. Then take a taxi to the most spectacular shows in town. For the latest great value holiday offers, ask for the new Sydney brochure at your local AFTA or licensed travel agent. Or phone 132077. Book now for your chance to win back the cost of your holiday.
Some people think small cars are like tin cans. They think that a small car couldn't possibly have a reinforced body, let alone front and rear crumple zones. And who's ever heard of a small car with dynamic side intrusion protection and a twin cam engine? Introducing the new Toyota Starlet. Mini, not tinny.
New Starlet. The internet will be the biggest thing to hit business since the Industrial Revolution.
The internet will just be a chat line for physicists and video game addicts.
One day the internet will be safe enough for the Colonel's secret formula to whiz right by the secret formula for Pabst.
No one really knows what the internet will be, but we engineer network systems in anticipation of this vast uncertainty, so that you and your company can approach it as one huge opportunity. Digital, whatever it takes.
Good evening. More finals at the Olympic swim trials tonight and highlights, of course, straight after Nightline. So if you're waiting up for that, we suggest you make yourself scarce for a few moments. And plenty of action in and out of the pool tonight. Firstly, news that coach Scott Volkers has had his 2-year ban for giving an illegal painkiller to Sam Riley halved, but he'll still be unable to officially coach Riley in Atlanta. In the pool, Hayley Lewis took out the 800 metres freestyle for a 4th time in a row. There's Scott Volkers after hearing the good news. The 22-year-old clocked just over 8 minutes 36, finishing almost 2 seconds ahead of the Commonwealth champion, Stacey Gartrell. Both were under the Olympic qualifying time. Making a comeback tonight, Julie McDonald came in 3rd place. In rugby league news, the Canberra machine looked back on track tonight as they crushed the reigning premiers Canterbury. The Raiders ran in 7 tries, but victory has come at a heavy price. Another star succumbing to what appears to be a serious injury.
Both Canberra and the Bulldogs have had poor starts to the season. In front of their home crowd and on coach Tim Sheen's 300th game, the Raiders were determined to turn that around. Canterbury fought back but couldn't cross the Raiders' line.
Can Mullins catch him? Yes, he will.
Noah Nandruku stole his way through for a second.
He gets his second try.
Boyle's suspect try late in the half took the Raiders into the break, up 14-0. The second term couldn't have started worse for the Bulldogs. Tries first to Mullins.
Mullins will be hard to stop.
And a minute later to Nagas, putting the game beyond their reach.
In and away, that's as good as you'll ever see, that one.
The final score, 34-4, but the Raiders didn't have it all their own way. Lock Bradley Clyde receiving a serious ankle injury late in the game. Meanwhile, at Ballymore in Queensland, in the top-of-the-table Super 12 clash between Queensland and Auckland, Queensland started fast, and just got faster, running in 5 tries to 1 in the first half in a classic display of running rugby.
Auckland hold on, another one! Jackson Little! Have we ever seen a better performance from the Queensland side?
The red tide slowed but didn't stop in the second term, crushing Auckland by an incredible 51-8.
Tune! Yes!
Mark Barland for Nightline.
To AFL now, and a 6-1 final quarter has set up victory for the Fremantle Dockers over Melbourne at the Wacker in Perth. The Dockers getting home by 37 points. Final scores 13-18, 96 to Melbourne, 8-11, 59. 3 goals to Winston Abraham, who took one of the marks of the year, was the catalyst for the Dockers. Matt Dowling with all the action.
Players observed a minute's silence for the war fallen before the match. Moments later, Fremantle was showing battle scars. A free gave Melbourne the first goal for the game, but the Dockers hit back with the next 2, including a great kick from Ridley.
That's a fantastic goal.
The high-flying Demons, however, weren't daunted. 3 more goals, giving them a handy quarter-time lead.
Left foot snap by Craig Turley is a beauty.
The Dockers wasted chances early in the second term and showed poor judgment elsewhere. But Kickett made amends with a great snap, followed soon after by Abraham, who kicked 2 for the quarter.
Abraham clever.
The Dockers star was being paid some close attention. After half-time, he let his leap do the talking. The resulting goal put Fremantle in front, Bandy extending the margin after leading Steins a merry dance.
And goes for goal and kicks it!
With Viney off the ground, it didn't look good for Melbourne, but desperation and skill kept the Demons in the hunt.
Pretty good by Turley, he's got it!
Early in the last quarter, Allen put the home team 10 points up. Then Coops, in his AFL debut, made his mark.
Magnificent goal!
Matt Dowling for Nightline.
Yeah, great win there for the Dockers. Well, world number 2 Andre Agassi has been booed by the crowd as he went down to Spain's Alberto Costa during the Monte Carlo Open. Agassi was beaten in straight sets in less than an hour. He said he was just as disappointed as the crowd with his performance. A soccer friendly between Holland and Germany has turned sour when rival fans clashed in Rotterdam. The animosity spilled over onto the ground, with the fans trashing the stadium as Germany claimed a 1-0 win. 71 people were arrested, and the trouble has organisers worried about security for the upcoming Euro Cup in Britain. And Jim, also on soccer, it seems one of the game's great mysteries has finally been solved. England's World Cup hero Geoff Hurst is to finally get the ball he booted to a hat-trick in the 1966 final against Germany at Wembley. Helmut Haller scored the first for Germany and afterwards kept the ball. The English claim tradition demanded it went to Hurst, and the London tabloids recently joined the fray. Haller has now flown to England to hand the ball over in return for a donation to a children's cancer charity. Jim, that is the day in sport. Have a great weekend.
Same to you, Eddie. Thank you. In finance news, the Australian share market closed 9 points up today. In Tokyo, the Nikkei was up 4 points. In London tonight, the FT100 is 12 points up in morning trading. Gold is fetching $393.65 US an ounce. And in European trading tonight, the Australian dollar is buying 79.08 US cents, 1.21 Deutschmarks, 84 yen and 52p. The national weather and a high continues to dominate much of Australia, although cold fronts are bringing unsettled conditions to parts of the southeast. The forecasts: showers for Brisbane, fine in Darwin, fine also for Sydney, Canberra and Adelaide, some rain for Melbourne and Hobart, and for Perth, a fine day ahead. That's the news this Friday night. To finish tonight, the barbecue sauce from hell. In the US state of Iowa, Big Daddy Seymour is offering 500 greenbacks to anyone who can eat a burger dripping with his secret Superhot recipe. Challengers first sign a legal waiver so they can't sue for bodily damage. 988 people have tried, only one has succeeded, and he, like many of the other challengers, wound up in hospital with stomach problems. Good night.
Nightline was proudly brought to you by The National, tailoring banking to your needs, and Ansett Australia, one of the world's great airlines.